That morning began like any other for Evelyn, a cup of black coffee in her favorite ceramic mug fingers scrolling through her phone in silence. The kitchen window caught the soft morning light casting a golden sheen across the granite countertops. Nathan, her husband, had already left for an early meeting, leaving behind the faint scent of aftershave and a half-eaten banana on the table. She nearly scrolled past it, a boomerang from her niece Ava. Champagne glasses clinking. The caption read, "Family yacht tradition can't wait to set sail." In the background, she saw it clearly, the yacht, the ocean, and every familiar face except hers. She froze, clicked into the post, then another. There was Whitney, her sister-in-law, laughing beside her husband. Eleanor, Nathan's mother, smiling with a mimosa in hand. Cousins Carter and his wife, even Uncle Max, who once swore he hated boats. But not Evelyn. No invite, no message, no email, not even a casual mention. She opened the family group chat, Davis Legacy Voyagers. Her name used to be there. Nathan had added her after the wedding, then quietly removed it after a minor seating incident at a holiday dinner. Now she was gone, not by accident, not with explanation, just gone. What stunned Evelyn wasn't the exclusion itself, it was how normal it seemed to everyone else. No one paused, no one questioned. It was as if her absence had become an expected norm, not worth noting. She wasn't angry. Not exactly. What she felt was a strange stillness, the kind that arrives when someone says aloud something you've long suspected. They hadn't forgotten her. They had erased her on purpose. That afternoon, while rinsing a glass at the kitchen sink, Evelyn's phone buzzed. A new message from Whitney. She dried her hands and unlocked the screen. The text was short with a sad face emoji at the end. "Hey Evelyn, just realizing we might have missed reserving a spot for you on the yacht this year. Things booked up super fast, so sorry, hope we can catch up after." Sweet, polished, disarming. The kind of message that sounded harmless unless you knew better. No offer to fix it. No suggestion of rearranging things. Just finality. As if she had never been expected to come at all. Evelyn didn't react. Not yet. A few hours later, the truth arrived quietly. Her inbox pinged with an email from Mariner Bay Charters, the luxury yacht service the Davis family used every year. The subject line read, "Cancellation confirmation. Cabin release successful." She clicked in. Her eyes found the line, "Immediately requester Whitney Carroll, submitted 3 days ago," before Evelyn ever even saw the Instagram post. Not a mistake, not an oversight. It was intentional, scheduled, decided. She didn't cry. She didn't reply to Whitney. Instead, she downloaded the email, printed a clean copy, and slid it into a folder labeled Assets and Tax tucked in her desk drawer. That evening, Nathan came home as usual. Evelyn waited until he had opened a beer before saying, "Whitney texted me about the yacht trip." "Yeah, you're going right?" he asked, eyes still on his phone. "She says she forgot to reserve me a spot." Nathan finally looked up, his brows knit slightly, but not in shock, and in that lack of surprise, Evelyn found her answer. That evening after dinner, Evelyn chose to wash the dishes by hand. The dishwasher was too loud, she needed the quiet. Nathan sat at the table scrolling on his phone like always. Stock alerts pinged softly, a stream of financial news flowing on the screen. She spoke up. "Did you know your family is planning another yacht trip?" Nathan looked up a little surprised. "Oh yeah, Mom mentioned it briefly. I think they're still finalizing the list." Evelyn tilted her head, her tone light. "Am I on the list?" He frowned, set his fork down. "Of course. Why wouldn't you be?" She smiled faintly, not from amusement. "Just curious." He nodded and returned to his phone. She knew he wouldn't check, and he wouldn't bring it up again. Later, as the kitchen dimmed and only the sound of a dripping faucet filled the silence, Evelyn sat alone. Nathan had retreated to his den, tuning into ESPN. Not a word about their conversation. No questions, no concern, no surprise. She sat still, asking herself, why wasn't he shocked? Why didn't he get angry on her behalf? The answer sharp and simple, because he was used to this. Used to her being left out. So used to it, he'd stopped seeing it as wrong. Evelyn didn't need Nathan to explode in her defense or storm out. She just needed the truth. A simple sentence like, "That's not okay," would have been enough. But instead, there was silence. And in that silence, she heard what mattered most. He knew, and he accepted it. That night, after Nathan disappeared into the den and the muffled sounds of ESPN echoed through the half-closed door, Evelyn sat alone in the dining room. Her laptop glowed in the dim light, the cursor blinking beneath a newly typed title. Things she did that I let slide. She didn't remember when she started typing, only that the words poured out as if they had been waiting for years. Small details seemingly trivial in isolation, but when strung together they told a story. A clear one. A pattern of quiet exclusion. Forgot to include me in Ava's birthday planning emails. Sent out 2 family holiday itineraries, neither with my name on it. Tagged the wrong Evelyn Miller in a public Facebook post and left it up for days. Canceled brunch due to family emergencies, then posted group photos the next day, everyone there but me. She remembered each moment. Not because they were dramatic, but because they added up like tiny scratches on glass, eventually fracturing the entire surface. By line 17, she stopped. Not because she had nothing more to say, but because her throat tightened. Not from anger, but from realization. She had allowed this to happen. She used to tell herself, pick your battles. But how many times could you let it go before silence became complicity? Evelyn looked at the list. She didn't add more. She didn't need to. The words on the screen were not just a private log, they were a quiet indictment. One not meant for anyone else. Just for her. For the first time, Evelyn admitted to herself, they didn't erase me all at once. They did it slowly. And I let them. The next morning, Evelyn didn't go to the farmer's market like she usually did. She sat at the kitchen counter, still in her soft gray sweater and jeans, sipping coffee that had long gone cold. No one called. No one reached out. And that only confirmed it. This wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. A quiet ping echoed from her inbox. She opened the email. It was from the yacht charter company this time, an official cancellation receipt. Cabin released. Request logged. Date of submission 3 days prior. Requester Whitney Carroll. Evelyn didn't flinch. Didn't cry. She just sat still, feeling a slow pressure rise behind her eyes like a wave building beneath the surface. She downloaded the email, printed a clean copy, and walked to the bottom drawer of her office cabinet. Inside was a plain manila folder once labeled taxes and assets. Today she peeled that label off and replaced it with a new one, receipts. She began gathering everything she had kept, not for revenge, but out of habit. The yacht purchase agreement, the wire transfer from her business account, the bank statement showing the deposit, the yacht catalog still marked with her handwritten notes. Each page slid into a sleeve in silence. No one saw. No one asked. No announcement was made. By the time Nathan returned home that afternoon, Evelyn was rearranging the files in quiet resolve. He kicked off his shoes, stretching like any other day, but this time she didn't greet him. She just looked at him. And in that look, something had shifted. No more pleading, no more need for explanations. Just clarity. She no longer needed his agreement. She had the truth on her side. And now she was ready to move, not loudly, but undeniably. That morning, Newport was still wrapped in fog. The marine haze clung to polished railings and gleaming yacht decks lined along the dock. Evelyn stepped out of the car, pulling a small rolling suitcase behind her. A simple black dress, a light tan coat. No jewelry, no perfume, no performance. She walked alone. No one came to meet her, but she wasn't here to be welcomed. She was here to reclaim what was already hers. From a distance, she saw them gathered near the boarding area. Whitney stood at the center as always, hair perfect, laugh rehearsed. Nathan lingered at the edge of the group, eyes down or deliberately averted. Evelyn didn't slow down. She rolled her suitcase steadily past curious glances. No one called her name. No one stepped forward. A few turned subtly away as if their social choreography could erase her presence. And then it happened. A uniformed crew member stepped forward, offered a small bow, and said clearly, "Welcome aboard, Miss Evelyn. The owner is now aboard." The words sliced through the surface tension like a blade. Evelyn didn't have to turn to know Whitney's face had frozen mid-expression. All the calculated erasure, the guest list edits, the quiet exclusions, the rewritten narratives undone by a single line. One that could not be contested. Evelyn nodded once at the crew member and walked up the ramp. Her heels struck the deck once, twice with a quiet certainty. Not dramatic, not defiant. She wasn't attending. She owned the place. Candlelight danced across the white linen tablecloth. Crystal glasses shimmered, silverware arranged as if measured with precision. Conversations floated through the air, broken occasionally by polite laughter. Whitney sat at the center of the table, wineglass in hand, scanning the group, skipping right over Evelyn. Evelyn sat at the end, hands resting on a brown leather folder. She hadn't touched her vanilla panna cotta. She didn't engage in the drifting dinner chatter, but her eyes were sharp. She was waiting. Whitney stood, lifted her glass, and began her usual polished toast, every word practiced, rehearsed. "Thank you all for being here. What makes legacy powerful isn't the assets, but the people who carry it forward with kindness and loyalty." Her gaze flicked across the room, paused near Evelyn, then passed on. When the soft clinking of glassware subsided, Evelyn rose. No anger, no volume, just a calm, even voice. "I'd like to contribute something to this conversation about legacy." The room fell still. Whitney froze, wineglass midair. Evelyn unzipped the folder and pulled out a printed document, company letterhead visible. "This is a transcript from a Zoom call between Whitney Carroll and the family's legal counsel held last month." She placed it in the center of the table, finger resting on a highlighted line. "She's not blood. She shouldn't own a family asset." Eyes turned to Whitney, her face drained of color. Evelyn slid forward another sheet. "This is the yacht's purchase agreement. Sole investor Evelyn Hart. Legal owner Evelyn Hart." Silence, deep, heavy. "I'm not sharing this to start drama," Evelyn continued. "I'm sharing it because I've been spoken about in rooms I wasn't invited into, and I've stayed silent for too long." No one interrupted. No one could. That night, Evelyn didn't win through confrontation. She reclaimed her place with truth. Dinner ended in silence. No one commented on Evelyn's statement, and no one outwardly objected. But glasses were set down more gently. Forks touched plates with care. Eyes avoided one another. Whitney didn't return to the main deck that evening. She vanished from the visible areas of the yacht. No more assertive footsteps across the planks, no more clipped greetings or polite performance. Her silence, so out of character, became the loudest sound on board. Evelyn didn't go looking for her. She didn't need to. Later that night, as Evelyn passed through the lower cabins, she heard a voice slip through a barely ajar door. Soft, not angry, not panicked. Just a breath of sound that made her pause mid-step. She took it. The thing that was supposed to be mine. No name, no audience. Just a quiet confession uttered in the belief no one was listening. Evelyn didn't stop walking. She didn't need to. She carried that sentence with her, not as a wound, but as confirmation. Whitney's collapse hadn't come with shouts or tears. It arrived with silence, with the way people had begun to speak directly to Evelyn, not around her, with nods that felt genuine, with the absence of that word legacy being used as a weapon. Whitney had tried to write her own version of the story and failed. That night, Evelyn sat alone on the aft deck, a cup of tea cooling in her hands. No more laughter, no toasts. The yacht drifted quietly through still waters, as if even the ocean had grown thoughtful. Nathan approached only after night had fully settled. He didn't speak right away. He stood by the railing, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the hazy horizon. "I've been thinking," he said at last, his voice low but steady. Evelyn said nothing. She waited. "About your speech. About the documents you laid on the table. About the way you looked at me afterward." She turned to face him, calm but unreadable. "I knew," he admitted, eyes still on the dark sea. "Not everything. But I saw how Whitney treated you. Every time she forgot to include you. Every time she got your name wrong on purpose. Every time I didn't say anything because I thought speaking up would just make things worse." Still, Evelyn said nothing. Her silence wasn't passive, it was expectant. She wanted to know if he'd go deeper. "I told myself silence kept the peace, that if you were patient they'd see you belonged. But now I see. My silence was its own kind of betrayal." She nodded slowly. Not forgiveness, but recognition. The truth finally called by its name. Nathan turned to look at her, his eyes steady for the first time in a long while. "If you'll let me, I want to make this right. Not with words, with actions." Evelyn held his gaze a moment longer. For the first time in years, she didn't see a passive observer. She saw a man standing between two histories and finally understanding that silence was never neutral. She didn't say, "I forgive you," not yet, but she didn't turn away. And for Nathan, that was enough for now. Enough to begin again. Not as a husband trying to fix things, but as a man who had stayed quiet too long and was finally ready to speak. The next morning, Evelyn sat alone in the lounge, early light filtering through the wide glass windows, glinting softly off her steaming cup of coffee. The room, once a stage for carefully scripted family dynamics, was now unusually quiet. And then one by one they came. The first was Maddie, Nathan's younger cousin. As always, Maddie approached hesitantly, eyes fixed on the floor. "I should have said something a long time ago," she murmured. "There were things I saw, but I didn't know what to do. I'm sorry I stayed silent." Evelyn didn't respond with blame. She simply nodded her quiet acknowledgement, saying, "I heard you." Next came Marlene, one of the elder women in the Davis clan, who once told Evelyn she was too serious to truly belong. That morning, she brought over a small spoonful of sugar and placed it gently beside Evelyn's teacup. She said nothing, but the look in her eyes as she did it, that was enough. Then Carter, Nathan's cousin, passed Evelyn as he headed toward the deck. Without breaking stride, he muttered, "I saw it coming. Just didn't think it'd crack this wide open." No one raised their voice. No grand confessions. But in each of these small gestures lay a truth they had seen. They had known. And they had chosen silence because it was easier. Evelyn didn't need long apologies. She didn't need to be welcomed back. What she felt in those moments was something she had craved for years, truth. And now it was slowly surfacing. Not from the loudest voice in the room, but from the ones who had kept quiet for too long out of fear, habit, or convenience. Later that afternoon, back in her cabin, Evelyn stood in front of the mirror. Not to fix her hair, not to rehearse a smile, but to really look at herself, the woman who once sat at the edge, who once smiled at the right times, stayed quiet to avoid disrupting the room. She didn't need to do that anymore. She wasn't seeking a seat at their table. She was the one now forcing others to shift in theirs. 1 week after stepping off the yacht, Evelyn's kitchen once again filled with the warm scent of baked goods and freshly brewed coffee. Sunlight poured through the garden-facing windows, casting golden rays across the walnut table she had refinished herself from a second-hand shop. There were no mass invitations sent through the Davis family thread. No formal RSVP list based on bloodlines. No Whitney. No legacy. Just a few names Evelyn chose by heart, not heritage. Nathan was the first to rise early, carefully brewing coffee and setting out her favorite white porcelain cups. Callista, her close friend and the writer who had published the piece about her, arrived with a tray of homemade lemon bars. Ronald, her longtime lawyer, came with his wife, placing a bottle of small-batch wine next to the flowers Evelyn had arranged that morning. No one dressed to impress. No one live-streamed. No one was assigned a role. They simply ate, laughed, and truly talked. There were no speeches, no toasts. But every shared story, every glance that didn't look away, these were the things Evelyn had been starved for during those years at tables polished in silver, but cold in spirit. As Nathan refilled her coffee, Evelyn said quietly, "Not everyone needs a seat at the table. Just the ones who truly belong." He nodded and said nothing more. This time he didn't need to. That afternoon, after everyone had gone, Evelyn began tidying up the bookshelves near the dining area. As she flipped through an old notebook, a folded piece of paper slipped out. The handwriting was unmistakably her father's, blocky, steady, and familiar, even years after he'd passed. "Don't fight for a seat. Build your own table." She sat at the table, placing the note next to the last untouched pastry. The brunch wasn't a statement. It was an answer from someone once excluded that she didn't need them anymore, and she didn't resent them either. She simply needed the truth. And that day, it sat with her at the table she built herself. That afternoon, Evelyn stood alone on the back deck of her home, sunlight spilling like honey across the weathered wood she had once sanded and stained by hand. There was no audience. No validation. Just stillness, the very thing she used to fear now turned into reward. She closed her eyes, drew in a deep breath, and let it go slowly. At last she understood she didn't need anyone's recognition to exist. She didn't need a seat at a family table to feel she belonged, because she had built her own. In the days that followed, life slowed down not out of exhaustion, but from no longer needing to prove anything. She didn't post victory photos or success quotes. She didn't need to be seen. What mattered was that she could finally see herself clearly, completely. One morning, Evelyn received a call from Maya Whitney's niece, the quiet, observant one, smart, watchful. "Ms. Evelyn," Maya said, "I'm applying for a startup mentorship program. I know I probably shouldn't ask, but would you read my application?" Evelyn was surprised but smiled. The sincerity in Maya's voice wasn't rooted in family obligation. It came from a young woman who had quietly seen what the others missed: a builder, a creator, a self-made presence. As Evelyn opened the file later that day, something clicked. Legacy isn't inherited. It's not passed through names or titles. It's what you pass down through action, through example. That evening, Evelyn set her teacup down and looked around her sunlit dining room, the same room that once held so much silence. Now, every object, every grain of wood, every person she chose to keep in her life was part of something new. No longer a Davis by expectation, no longer seated on the sidelines, no longer trying to be palatable enough not to be excluded. Evelyn didn't inherit. She created. Piece by piece, layer by layer, step by step. And that was the truest legacy of all.